I'm back. I had to get my thoughts together a little bit more. And also I wanted to make some, had to solidify some things that, I really wanted to discuss with this. I'll have to go back and edit and trim and whatever else. Anyway, like I said, and I'm just going to go with the flow. I have a little bit more organization around my thoughts now, but I'm going to go with the flow mostly. Um, and I think this might be, it might go into another video. I don't know. I'll probably discuss it in my blog also. I don't know yet. But spirituality and how it how it influences relationships. When I first thought of this concept, I was thinking more of like, as an individual, as we grow in our own journey, how that has effects in the relationship. And yeah, it's still, but there's so many facets of that, right? When we get into a union with another person, it sort of just opens up this whole new arena of things that, and possibilities of things that we can discover and learn and all of that. And I'm going to speak about some of my own. Um, and like I said, I don't have any shame around this anymore. No, I'm not all. Of course, there's always going to be things in life where we're not always proud of like how we handled it. I also feel like an imperative part of the spiritual journey is coming into an acceptance of the things that we have done, taking accountability for the things that we have done instead of attaching ourselves to the shame and the guilt and the discomfort and the ick and the cringe that accompanies many of the actions that we have been, we've done. Um, it's hard to get over that hump. However, I know many people. We all know somebody who struggles to take accountability, right? And in that, it's probably related to, a sense of not wanting to face things for whatever reason. And there can be many reasons why someone is uncomfortable with facing their own actions. I'm not here to psychoanalyze that today. Not today, but I would have a conversation about that with someone if you'd like. Anyway, I love this topic. I do. But it's important because if we can get over that initial hump, the cringe, the shame, all of that, it's like just getting to the summit, and then it's like so much easier. Now it'll feel like going downhill, but in reality, we've really reached that peak, so we can begin to explore things, and it opens up your heart space. It becomes easier. I promise you. And not that it's going to feel that way, but it is planting the seed for things to develop in a more, to go smoother in the future. The more we resist and deny and avoid, it really just kind of stacks up bricks, and it's going to make it harder to get over that peak. As opposed to if we just go ahead and step over it, yeah, that initial oop is hard. But it becomes easier. It's just like, like I'm sure someone could think of a better example than the one I'm giving, but it's like when you're learning something, the first time you're going to do it, it might be difficult, whatever it is. But it will gradually become easier as you continue to face it. Um, I don't know what I was listening to yesterday. Someone was talking about going on auditions, like if you're an actor, that first audition, and maybe, it might feel this way every time you go, but like the first or a couple of auditions might be extremely difficult. The nerves beforehand, the apprehension, the fear and all of that. But as you continue to do it, it becomes easier. Um, so I am understanding the importance of taking accountability and the importance of being transparent in taking accountability. Sorry, my animals are right there. Um, and I'm here to just put it out there. I'm also learning discernment, as always. But I think it's important to be real about where we've been. So it my brain is doing it again, where it's like a million windows are just clicking open. It's important for the collective growth and for ourselves in our own journey to be open and honest about the things that we have faced and experienced and the lessons that we have learned in that process. um, for one, and it's my firm belief that like if you're open and honest about the things that you've been through, it takes away the leverage that other people might have to use that against you. And I'm not saying that we should be super focused about what other people might say about us or anything, or any of that. I'm just saying that like if you're open and real, can't nobody pop up and be like, oh, by the way, like we all know, like in society today, like the whole Diddy thing, and I'm not really going to get into this, but you know, the whole P. Diddy thing, like if Homeboy would have come out and admitted all this shit, everything that he had done before anyone else did. Now, I'm not saying he wouldn't have gotten backlash or anything like that. And also, it gives a different energy than when someone else is coming out of the blue saying, hey, this is what I discovered. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that's a weird example, but I know myself that like I enjoy being transparent about things now. I can't say I was always like that. I also know it really difficult for me just because I think I'm more of that person who has naturally loved to deep dive my entire life, explore the shadow. Like I have been an underworld traveler my entire life. Many Scorpio themes in my chart and my human design, and I just enjoy going to the depths, you know, to dig up what's there because I know there's so much wisdom in these spaces. And not to say we can't learn things from good experiences. I'm just saying we all know that like when you go through something really difficult, you usually walk away with a lot of feelings, whether it's positive or negative. You really walk away with a bounty of wisdom and knowledge and ideas and opinions from whatever you experienced if it was difficult. Anyway, so I'm going to be transparent. The names and everything will be altered. Just like if I'm writing a book, I'm not going to use people's names or anything like that. That's not important. I am going to speak as objectively and detached and try to keep my emotions out of it as well. I believe that's important because I'm learning that, you know, like regardless of how I felt in the moment, there were lessons and things that needed to occur. We all have a choice. We all choose, most of us, unless you were put into an arranged marriage, but even then you have the choice to comply with it or not. We all have a choice in what we do, the relationships we enter, how long we choose to stay in those relationships. We have control and a choice over ourselves and our actions. And in that, knowing that and fully accepting that, it makes it difficult to point the finger at anyone else. Now, you can say from an objective standpoint, like this person did this. But to say like when you say like, oh, you hurt my feelings, that person might have said something that was considered rude, mean, you know, degrading, considered. But how we process it and absorb it and how we choose to take it in, whether we choose to believe it, whether we choose, you know, we have a choice. They don't have to hurt our feelings. They can say something in the attempt to what they're projecting, you know, an insecurity and a fear within themselves towards us. We don't have to accept it. We can refuse that. We can say no, stranger danger. You know, like we don't have to take that in. And I'm not saying this is easy. I just know that this is true. You know what I mean? Like there's many things that it's like I understand it now. It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to handle it flawlessly at all. And that's okay. It's a learning process. But we have control over ourselves. Nobody can do anything that you don't allow them to do as far as like affecting you emotionally. You know what I mean? Um, so yes, I'm going to be transparent. I feel like this is something I've needed to do for a while as in regards to relationships specifically. I feel like I could be like a relationship counselor at this point, y'all. It's insane. Yeah, go lay down, honey. Go lay down. Sorry, I've got my door cracked and my dog is like, it's like, girl, go lay down. All right. So today on February 22nd, it's the 222 portal, by the way. February 22nd, 39 years old. I'm on level 39 in life. I am much different than who I was last year at this time, let's see, last year was 2024. Yeah, much different, much different. And I was different from who I was the year before that. Bear with me. I have a point here. I say that because like as I go through things and I come out on the other side, the things that I'm learning, it feels more like I am remembering them. And what I mean by that is like it doesn't feel like it's a new concept. It feels like it's something that I've always known, and therefore when it comes to light, it's like it feels very, it's a smooth integration. Now, not to say that I'm able to instantly mold my actions and my thoughts around it as it needs to be, but the understanding of it comes in very smooth. um, I'm sure many people can relate to this. It's like you learn something and it's like, oh, of course, that makes sense. Now, whether it's easy to do it afterwards, it might be a different story. And that proves the complexity of our human nature. But that is how it feels like with me. And so, like, when I'm speaking of things, like, it might sound like I know, like I'm confident or sure in what I am saying. And also, like, I'm not ignorant to the fact that like I was the opposite of many of the things that I am speaking about not that long ago. I love growth. This is why I said in the other video, I believe that like we have to allow others the process of growth. We have to allow ourselves the process of growth without getting clung, is that a word? Without clinging to the emotions of how we feel about that growth process. We've all encountered people where it's like, maybe you haven't seen somebody in a while, or I don't know, maybe like somebody used to do something and now they don't. And it's like people who will sometimes respond to that like, oh, well, they were doing this just the other day or just last week or just last year, and now they call themselves acting the opposite and doing this, and they just, yeah, maybe they have grown. Maybe they have grown. Yes, there are some people who it's all for show and they're just doing things based off of how they know people want them to respond. And also, it is very easy and simple, not simple, it's very, it's also a possibility that someone can grow. Someone can grow from one day to the next. We may not be able to comprehend, and the level of growth might vary, but someone can change their mind, change their perspective in an instant, allowing people to grow. So, like I'm saying, like, I am aware of a lot of things now, but it wasn't that long ago that I was an active participant in many of the things that it's like I choose not to be now. We'll put it that way. And in that, in relationships, it has taught me much. Sorry, I'm waiting on an Amazon order, and I don't want to miss it. Between 3:30 and 7:30. Okay, whatever. My dog is barking. I thought maybe they were at the door. So, as I was saying, I, without getting into astrology, because I'm a huge astrology nerd, by the way, but if you're knowledgeable in astrology at all, and what I mean by that, knowing what the planets represent and how the signs in those planets will affect an individual, might affect an individual. I have a Cancer stellium in my chart. Cancer is prevalent. I think it's my Sun, my Mars, my Mercury, my midheaven. There's something else in there. That's already 4. Heavy Cancer placements. My Mars is in Cancer. My Mercury is in Cancer. And if you're privy to astrology at all, Mercury, to sum it up, is the planet of communication, how we communicate, how we speak, talk to others. There's many more things. Mars is, I understand it to be like the planet of, it's almost like it represents strong emotions, like the passion, the rage, lust, anger, how we express that. And like I said, there's many other things, but this is what I know it to be in my experience. And so, in that, having Cancer in those placements, I have seen firsthand how intense that can be when I experience emotions, when I express those emotions. And in the past, in relationships, And this ties into how I was, how my childhood, and now how I said before, how the childhood is a breeding ground for how we are as adults. So in my childhood, like I explained, I was extremely controlled. My environment was extremely controlled by my guardians. What I wore, what I watched, the people I hung out with, how I styled my hair, anything having to do with self-expression at all, was everything was controlled and influenced by my parents, specifically my mother, but by my parents. Um, and in that, I was not really allowed to express myself as far as like um, anger specifically was extremely controlled in my house. I'm sure I know like in a lot of minority families, Hispanic and African American, like, like you slamming doors. Are you serious? There was no slamming doors. You'd get your door taken away. Talking back. No, you couldn't. Your parents tell you to do something. Your parents are disciplining you. If you so much as mutter under your breath, you might get smacked. You know what I mean? Like it was not of something that was like you could just do. And this is where I'm like I am here for gentle parenting in the sense of letting your children, giving your children safe spaces to express themselves, meaning like let them express themselves and teach them the parameters of what is healthy and what may not be. Instead of just telling them not to do it at all, show them. And if you don't know, then that's a different story. But this is why I feel like it's important. And I am saying all of this because I went through this process firsthand and I experienced it in childhood from different standpoints. And this is what I've come, the conclusion I've come to now. Like I said, in my childhood, it was very controlled, very monitored, very mediated. I feel like there's a word I'm searching for and it's not quite there. Um, Influenced by my guardians, very restrained, repressed. I could not. So it was like I got upset. And usually the things I was upset about, I say usually because it wasn't everything, because I was a child, I'm sure there was things where it was like, girl, you don't need to be doing that. Calm down. And also there was plenty of other things where it was like, I just want to express myself. Or like, when I came out, or when I was outed rather, that was not met with approval whatsoever. And so the things that were said to me and the actions that were taken, I had strong emotions to that were valid. To be angry, to be confused, to all of that. And I was not allowed to express that anger in the ways that I wanted. I wanted to, it was very much my father would always say, the bottom line. The bottom line is this, essentially meaning like, this is the end of the conversation. Anything you have to say, you're not going to be able to say anything past this point. What I say goes. I've listened to what you have to say enough. That is the end. Which usually meant that anything that I had said really wasn't going to be considered. It's not going to turn out the way I want. That was for sure. So it was very much like a shut up, essentially, like hush. You don't get to say anymore. And in that, I was swallowing and repressing and burying most of all of the anger that I felt for many years. Many years. Anger was not really expressed. Now, I think I saw my mother get very reactive and angry with me. I have one specific memory. But my parents, even themselves, didn't really like express a lot of strong, like in your face emotion. Now we all know emotions, whether we can see them on the surface of us or not. Emotions are still happening. But I did not see many outward, strong, obvious, tangible displays of emotion in my family structure, which is a whole nother component to how I ended up as an adult. But specifically anger, I wasn't taught how to express it in a healthy way, or even taught that it was okay to express it. It was never validated or any of that. I'm saying all of this because now that planted the seed. That was my childhood into adulthood, further down the road. Now I'm in relationships. Now I'm in experiences where, you know, I, I might be provoked by another individual. Um, it brought up many facets. One was avoiding confrontation, which is another aspect of what I want to talk about in relationships and what I experienced. There was that. But if I wasn't avoiding the confrontation, get out of the way. Get out of the way. Um, like as individual zodiacs, we a lot of times we make little jokes about like the things that we experience and our tendencies, because I do believe that every sign does have a specific set of tendencies, symptoms, whether we want to admit to it or not. I feel like the how true it is to that sign is dependent on the inner work that they've done with themselves. So yes, I believe that we all kind of start off with these things in a bucket, based on our sign, but it's not just the sun sign, of course. I could do a whole nother video on this. But every sign does have like we have our little bucket of like the things that will most likely manifest in our interactions at some point to some degree. And with cancers, one of those is that I've realized for myself and that I've seen is we are very calm presenting. Now, on the surface, things might seem, hmm, we're just cool and collected and peace and love. However, beneath that is usually just waves crashing up against the shell. Like, we may not see it, but within that shell there's just waves, just it's like a tidal. You ever go to a wave pool, like a park where there's a wave pool, and you're just woo, everybody's bobbling around, and yeah, that is the inner emotional landscape of a Cancer, in my opinion, of myself. And that's not to say it's bad. It's just it's eventful. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot going on. Um, and in that, when you drop some anger into that, if you have not worked on yourself, if you have not, therapy, whatever it is, it can be extremely explosive. Now, I believe this does tie into the Mercury sign and how we, communicate and express. And Mars is also how we express that. But having that in Cancer, it can be like if you have like each side, we'll say good and bad for the sake of just separating it. But I don't believe it's good or bad. It's just different. But how about we'll say A and B? A over here, Cancers, whatever, can be very loving, calm, generous, nurturing, accepting, inviting, welcoming. Over here, manipulative, angry, unforgiving, resentful, holding grudges, spiteful, just mean, fucking mean. You know what I mean? A and B. Um, and there was a period of my life, and it was directly influenced by my childhood, just as it is with everyone, where if you got me, let me not say if you got me, because I always have control over my own actions. But if I was in a situation where I lost control, I passed the threshold of not wanting to confront, because there's always like that period of time where it's like, I really don't want to go through this. I want to avoid popping off, crashing out, whatever you want to call it. I want to avoid it at all costs. However, if it gets past that point where I don't care, that's where it was like I did not have a lot of control. Now, I had one relationship of about 12 years where it was extremely, it was get out of the way for real. Now, um, it was mostly, let's see, the outward displays of anger were mostly towards myself. Like I went through many years where I self harmed, where it was like I was taking that anger out on myself, cutting. Um, and then a lot of times in fits of anger, there was plenty of times during that 12-year relationship, that time of my life, where I punch a door, punch a wall, punch something that I knew would give way. Messed up my hand many times, punching a mirror, punching a door, punched a hole through a door, kicking things, slamming things around, getting that it's like you want an outlet for those emotions that are bubbling up and just boom, to get it out so it can settle down. You know what I mean? And I was doing that for a time. It was not towards anybody else. There was a relationship I was in, however, where that person was very, and all it takes sometimes is just someone else willing to do something. And then you're like, well, if you're willing to do it, now it kind of opens the door. And now here I am. I feel like it's okay too. It was never my natural inclination to be physically abusive whatsoever. I was in a relationship that became physically abusive. I was never the initiator, but it became so normal that it was like I was very much in that mode of let's go, let's do this. And that was not my natural state. I did not like that. And so I would sort of like pick up things and throw them against the wall. Just like in a sometimes in a desire to assert dominance in that situation. Like, you're not going to do this to me. You're not going to scare me. You're not going to demean me. And then other times it was just to express my anger, but it was like an outward display. Like, I'm going to chuck this ashtray across the room. It's going to shatter. And it was near you. I didn't throw it at you, but it was near you. You know what I'm saying? That's still not okay. But it was like, I'm saying all this to say that, like, to set it up, because I feel like there's probably other people out here like this, or you've been like this or whatever. It is not our natural instinct to harm anyone at all. We do not want to do that. And also, if someone is provoking us, it can be very easy, because we are a water sign, to fit that form, fit that shape, and go with the flow of what is happening in that situation. Be very much a mirror for the energy that is being presented to us. So if you are going ham on 10 crunk, I am matching your energy. And in fact, I'm going to try to match your energy, and I'm going to try to exceed your energy, so your energy comes the fuck down. And I was very much in that mode. There was no restraints. There was no bumper guards. There was nothing. There was no lifeguard. It was just get out of the motherfucking way. It was bad. It was very reactive. Now, it wasn't just over everything, but if an argument got to a certain point, and it's always been like, if someone is threatening me or someone I care about, do you have a will? Have you written a will? Have you gotten you know what I'm saying? Like, do you have life insurance? Have you said your last rites? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, don't threaten me or anyone I care about, because even to this day, that, not to say I'm gonna hurt anybody. I have much more control now, but the emotions it will bring up are still very intense. And back then, forget about it. I probably would have gone to jail. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying all this to say I was very emotionally reactive, specifically with anger. Specifically with anger, because with other things, it was very much more reserved. Not to say it wasn't being felt on an extreme level, but it was not being expressed necessarily on an extreme level. Uh, and the first relationship that I had it wasn't my first relationship, the first one that I'm speaking of, the one I had for 12 years, I was also in active addiction at that time. So was my partner. And so now you add a substance into the mix of emotional instability, and it was like UFC up in that bitch. It was bad. But that was sort of like, when you think back to like, what did that relationship teach me? What did this time teach me? One of the things I know for sure is that it was the initial stages of bringing it to light, showing me who I was. It was bringing up these things so I could see them. Like, girl, this is here. This is something that you're dealing with. You need to look at it. You know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes that's how things start off. Be willing to say all the time, where it's just like, it's showing us, like, excuse me. It's like those things, like, I just wanted to scooch in here and tell you about your car's extended warranty. Yeah, it's like, oh, I just wanted to scooch on here and tell you that you've got a lot of anger inside of you that you need to find a healthy outlet for. That's what was happening. Not to say I was ready to even acknowledge that, face it, let alone take the steps to start healing it, but it was brought to my attention during that time. And just seeing the extremes of how it could go, it was ugly, y'all. It was ugly. This is where I say I am not proud of it. I am not ashamed of it, because for one, I'm no longer that person. For two, what's the point in being ashamed of it? It already happened. You know what I mean? And not to say I just like shrug my shoulders like, fuck it. It's in the past. It doesn't matter. But in a sense, it's in the past. It doesn't matter. Not to say that I don't care about how my actions affected someone else or any of that. It's just to say that, like, for me to hold on to the shame and guilt, what is that doing for me now? When I feel shame and guilt, is it sending blessings to anyone else? No. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I feel bad about it. Is that sending money to someone's bank account? No. So what is it doing for me? If it's not doing shit for anybody else, I'm the only one holding this in. And shame and guilt will eat you away from the inside out. It will. This is why I say facing it is far better than allowing it to fester inside of you, ignoring it and all of that, because it's like a cancer. It literally can manifest as physical, as cancer in your body. Um, and so, yeah, I'm not proud of that. I'm also not ashamed of it anymore. I worked very hard to change myself, to to heal, and it's a continuous process of healing and growth. Of course, I'm just saying, like, I'm miles from who I used to be in that. And so I'm trying to be as transparent as possible about it, because if you find yourself in a place now where you are experiencing these things, do not have shame and guilt. Not to say don't be what's the word, apathetic to it. That's not good either. Like, we need to take accountability for what we're doing, and it's not going to feel good, because I think inherently most of us want to be good people. We don't want to harm, especially our loved ones. So when we're faced with situations where we didn't perform in the ways that we, in an emotional state of mind, our actions, as opposed to when we are calm and reflecting on it, it's going to bring up cringe. It will. It will. It's like that secondhand embarrassment, or post embarrassment, where you feel it after the fact. And it's like, oh my God, did I really do that? Did I really go there? Ugh. And we were in our emotional state of mind during that time. It's a specific point of the brain that's like lit up when we are experiencing strong emotions like that. And when we try to, first of all, when we're in that emotional state of mind, this is science and medical stuff, by the way. You can Google this. When we're, that part of our brain is lit up and we're in a fit of rage or we're extremely sad, our logical decision making portion of our brain is like shut off, or it's dormant or whatever. So when we try to bring actions and decisions into the mix while we are experiencing a tornado, a hurricane, a monsoon, a tsunami of emotions, it's not usually going to go well. It's not. That's why they tell you, to calm down, like, we'll come back to this conversation, or come back to it when you're not so upset, to take a breather, take a walk. That is why. It gives your brain a chance to shift out of all of this emotion, so your logical, your sane decision making, your normal, your baseline can come to the forefront and be like, all right, this is how we need to handle this. Trying to do it simultaneously, it's like oil and water. I don't recommend. I don't recommend. But I didn't know this, because just like with everything, if we're not taught it, if we don't hear it from anyone else our entire lives, if we don't make the active choice to go to therapy, whatever, we just may we may never encounter it based off of how we grew up. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you are, depending on your environment, you may never encounter certain topics and stuff. And if it's something that, you struggle with, you can go years before you're ever even faced with a time when it's brought to your attention. This is why I'm saying we have to have compassion for others, and with ourselves, because the way life is set up, the way things unfold, we're holding ourselves like to like blaming others specifically, or they should know better. Oh God, I hate that. I hate that. You should know better. You should do this. And I hate it for many reasons. One, because I was told this many times growing up. You should. For two, I experienced this in past relationships where it was like I was being blamed, or the finger pointed at me for things that the other person felt like I should have known. Um, Now, I am a little bit psychic. I am. And also, that doesn't mean that it's going to involve everything, right? Yeah, and that's what I dislike about it, because that's another part of like our complex human nature, is that we can know things and we can do things very, very well, but then in another area be very clueless about the same sort of topic. We've all met somebody where it's like, they're so good at this, but why do they suck at this? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that, we should talk about people or view others that way, but I'm setting that up as in like an example. Like, we've all met someone where it's like, yes, I applaud you in this area, So it's shocking to us when over here, this person seems to not know what the fuck to do at all. That's just the complex nature of ourselves. It's okay. It happens. Whether we choose to acknowledge it, it happens with everybody. Um, and so, yeah, I didn't know this for a while. And it took being in relationships for it to be brought to my attention. And then for me to decide finally, that was my choice. Like, hey, you need to do something about this. Do you want to do something about this? Now I could have chosen to say, fuck no, I want to be angry. This anger feels good, because it did. When you haven't been able to express something and to get something out, it feels good. It does. That's why a lot of times they tell you, like, if you're angry, you go to the gym, get a physical activity to channel that emotion. Punch something, have sex, whatever it is, get that aggression out in a healthy way. And that's why they say that, because it feels good when it's released. It's just how we're choosing to release it. And I didn't always express that well in my relationships. I did not. I didn't. Um, from my knowledge, there was, after that 12-year relationship, there might have been some like shoving past, or some shoulder, something, not to say that I'm not going to say I was never physically aggressive in any other sense. I don't have a lot of recollection of those times. I'm sure there was moments, like I said, where it was like, I'm going to punch something, not the other person, but I'm going to be physically aggressive towards something right now to express my anger. But I know for sure I was verbal, very verbal, very animated. You see people arguing and you get the hands clapping and the gestures and the pacing around and I mean, just like I was a sim character, just gooba gobble, whatever. Very expressive. I was very one of those people where it was like, if I was in an argument, I wanted to get to a place of resolution. I was trying to regulate that emotion. This is what I've realized as I've been in therapy and everything. Like, in those moments where we are, especially anxious people, anxious attachment styles, as I was, I believe that I am more in a secure attachment style now. But there are still traits of the anxious style. But very much I was in the anxious style before. Um, and if you're like that, and if you've ever experienced that, it's like you are trying to emotionally regulate that fear, that anxiety of like, is this person going to leave me? Are they ever coming back? There's so many things that are coming up in those spaces. And so you're trying to reach a point of closure in your mind. And so it was like very hard to let things go. Very hard. Like, I wanted to get to the root of it. Let's come to a place where we're like, all right, we can at least walk away from this without being pissed off right now. But I also know that is not always possible. I was trying to reach a place of closure and logic during an extremely emotional time. I didn't know this wasn't possible. I was never taught this. I was never shown this. I wasn't even allowed to express anger. How was I supposed to know anything else? You know what I mean? I'm saying this because I'm trying to normalize. And like I said, this is never to just dismiss someone's actions. We all still need to be held accountable. We are adults in the sense of we need to learn how to control things that are unhealthy. You can't just be out here just punching stuff and blame it on the fact that you weren't taught this in childhood. I am not saying that. I'm saying we can have an understanding and some compassion and some grace towards others and ourselves, but to just excuse it time and time again without there being any consequences or change or boundaries being constructed is not okay. And that's essentially what eventually happened in those situations where I couldn't just keep blaming it on that. Like, if it was brought to my attention that this is what it is, cool. Now I need to do something about it. That is my part. That is my responsibility to myself to do something about it. And so I went through that process of trying the best I knew how, because once again, this wasn't taught, trying to control that and to teach myself how. And it was messy. It was messy. I didn't have a guidebook. I didn't have Cliff Notes. I didn't have a therapist at that time. I was just trying to do it. And when you're trying to do something on your own, you're kind of just using your own ideas. And At first it went back to just repressing it again. All right, I realize that this is not the greatest, and it's causing others pain and discomfort and this and that, and I don't like that. I don't want to be that person. So suck it in. Don't show it. That was my instant reaction. Like, go back to holding it in. Well, I quickly realized that that was sort of the root of it all, was holding it in. No, I need to find better ways to express it. Better ways to prevent myself from getting to those points where it is that extreme. And this was a messy period. And like, being in a relationship while you are facing major themes about yourself and your life is tricky. It's not easy on you. It's not easy on the other person or anyone else involved. And I'm not here to say that it is. Especially if that other person is equally dealing with the same shit or the opposite. It's a battlefield, essentially. It was bad. It could have been worse. It can always be worse, right? If we're comparing it to someone else. But it was messy. I can say that. I said things I'm not proud of. I did things as far as like, my physical actions, that I'm not proud of, and it's unfortunate that I behaved in certain ways. It is. I've also, over time worked very hard to, like I said, getting in therapy was the major one, because I realized that I don't have the knowledge myself to face whatever the fuck this is. I see it. It's been brought to my attention. I can no longer ignore it. I know it's affecting others. I care about others and my family structure. So I want to fix this. I just don't know how. So I got into therapy. And that's why I strongly advocate for therapy, because if you can't figure it out on your own, if you're not fortunate to have someone in your life who is knowledgeable to help you or whatever, you can spend a long time just drifting in this sea of uncertainty where things are just really, really tumultuous in your life until you make a choice to seek, help. It's okay. It's okay. And I think integrating that sense of it's okay is hard for people because, like I said, we think, oh, we're adults. We should know better. Oh, we're this age. You should already be able to do this. Can we skip that mess? Okay, that might be our belief, but is that the fact of it? No. We should, because what? Just because we're a certain age? We all know somebody who is older than us who behaves very immaturely. You know what I mean? So it's like age ain't got shit to do with it. We've all met children who seem like old ass ancestors. Age has nothing to do with it. It has so many other components, and one of those is, were we taught? Did we have a template? Did we have someone showing this us at all? For many of us, no. So let's skip over that whole, oh, I'm this age, I should know better. And I'm saying this knowing that I still do this to myself at times, where it's like I feel like, oh, you're an adult now. You should be able to handle this better. And I'm actively trying to replace that word in my vocabulary and to work on that. But I know that it's not just an overnight thing. So have compassion with yourself and other people. But at the same time, it would behoove us to start to recognize that we're holding ourselves to a standard based off of a number. Like we all, most of us, a lot of us, you remember being 18 and being like, I'm an adult now. I'm an adult now. Or 13, when you get into that teenage point of your life and you just, the world is your oyster and you feel invincible and I'm grown. I can do this on my own. And then many years later, looking back on that, like, oh, that was cute. I thought I was grown. It's depending on our environment, the things we're taught, our higher guidance, the journey we're meant to be on in general, we may not encounter many things. And it's set up that way, I believe, intentionally, because there might be another time down the road where we're faced with it in a specific way, just like it was with me. My childhood set up everything. It was like setting the scene in a play. Then in my adult life, I started to act in that play and realize, like, oh, this is why certain things had to happen this way. Okay. And now I'm making the choice to face it and to try to heal from it. So that's just one example as far as anger. and how your childhood will greatly influence your adult tendencies. It did with me, and like I said, I'm not proud of a lot of the things. I also know, and this is how I do relate to that whole, like, we're doing our best. I didn't know any better for a while. For a while, I didn't know any better. Once I knew better is when I decided to try to start changing it. But I didn't know any better for a while. And that's where I understand the concept of you're always doing your best. Of course, there's always room for improvement, but there's certain things that we just are unaware of, people. We're unaware of it. If you do not have an awareness of it, it's going to be controlling you in some sense. That's why I feel like self-awareness, or aiming to become more self-aware, is huge. First of all, if your life is great and roses and you don't see any problem with it, then, do what you do. But for many of us who have faced many things, these relationships that keep falling apart in the same similar ways, jobs, whatever, dynamics that keep unfolding in the same way, that's a good little signal that, like, hey, maybe there's something I can look at within myself that I'm not seeing, that is setting the ground, the soil for these things to grow. Like, what is happening inside of me that I don't see, that is causing these things to manifest? Because it happens that way. This is another part of, like, becoming aware of our spiritual nature. Whether you want to call it spirituality or not, it's cause and effect. Think about it just from a psychological term. When you're a child and the things you go through influence as you are as an adult, it's still a spiritual factor. It's also a psychological thing. It's important to become aware of our unconscious habits the best we can. And you think, well, if it's unconscious, how do I even know? That's where you just have to start asking yourself questions. And it helps very much so to have a therapist, someone from an objective third person point of view, who can look at things on the outside looking in and give you their loving, their safe opinion about what they've observed. I'm sure all of us have had moments in life where someone has said something about us and we're like, what? We might get upset that they said something about us. And it's like, well, instead of getting upset, think about it. Has this come up before? Have other people said this to me? Could I possibly be doing this? I don't know. Maybe. It's worth investigating instead of getting upset. That's where the whole criticism can come in handy, the positive aspect of criticism. Because if it's not brought to our attention in a critical way, we may never discover that it even existed. And like I said, the specific relationships I'm discussing did not work out from many facets. I am understanding my role that I played in many of those things. Now, it is never just one person's actions that cause something, in my opinion. I believe it takes two to tango, as they say, and you might think, well, you might see like somebody who just, I'm going to give an example here, and some people may not like this example, and I'm going to try to say it in a compassionate way because I have good intentions in setting up this example. But if you're like I was in a very physically abusive relationship at a time in my life, just like many women have faced this with men in their lives, where it's like, say the husband, the boyfriend, whatever, just is physically abusive, beats on them. From the outside looking in, even from that person's own perspective, we think victim. There's a aggressor and there's a victim. It's never just that simple, though, right? Not to say that you wouldn't say necessarily like, oh, the person being abused and beat on and whatever is in the wrong. That would be weird to say, right? It's not to say they're in the wrong. It's to say they do have a choice. Unless you are like physically being held captive and preventing you from leaving, there is a choice to leave that dynamic. That is all I'm saying. I hope I said that in a calm, in a gentle way, because I don't want to take away from the complexity of those situations, because it gets very layered and deep. And I know it's trauma bonding and codependent. There's many things at play that make it extremely difficult, that make it feel impossible to to change those situations. I also understand that, like I said, unless you are being physically restrained from leaving, you have a choice to leave. And that is hard for us to do. Absolutely. It's hard. It's hard. Because it's never just you think, well, if I'm getting hit, leave. That's simple. No. Now that I've gone through this, I know it's not that simple. Especially if you've been with someone for any significant amount of time, those codependency things have developed. And usually in those dynamics, there's things still happening that are nice, are good, are beneficial. You still, most times, right, there's enough positivity present to where it's like these times of abuse, you justify staying. Oh, they're going to change. Oh, it was my fault during this time. Oh, it was this component during this time. So you just keep making excuses. Something is anything else to blame. You know what I mean? And so it's very complex. But I do know the cut and dry, the end of it is we do have a choice. And I say this, I was in the same situation. I had the same choice. I stayed for many years. Now it was really only physical, like that last year of that 12-year relationship. But I had a choice the entire time to leave. I made excuses why I couldn't. Oh, I don't have a car. I don't have any place to go, or this and that, blah, 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 blah. And yes, these things were true. And yes, it would have been hard and all of that. And essentially, I left without any real place to go. I was fortunate to have someone offer, me a place to stay for a little while, but it was all the same risk the entire time. What am I going to do? The uncertainty, the unknowing. It was all there the entire time. You just have to reach a point where you are fed up more than you are worried about what's to come. Or you start to love yourself more than you love putting up with this bullshit. Yeah. This is it's a very deep topic and very personal for me. And I feel like I could go on for a lot with this. Um, I want to discuss at least one other thing in relation to this. There's many things I could discuss in this. I feel like this topic is like there's no final point of it. It just you could keep talking about it. Um, I will say, yeah, I'll mention this. I don't know how long this has been going. I think it's almost an hour, maybe longer. Whatever. Um, so another thing, like I told you guys, how I was raised, how I grew up, how as a child, how my parents related to me. I have been in positions in my adult life where I've had the privilege and the blessing and the opportunity to act as a co-parent, to act as a foster parent of sorts to children that were not my own, to be in that role of parental figure, of a role model, whatever you want to call it, to a child. I was in a relationship where there was children that were not my own, but they very much, it felt like to me, became my children in a sense for a period of time. And so immediately, walking into that dynamic, first of all, being a Cancer especially, I took that seriously. It's like, this is my family now. I love my little family. These are my little baby chicks, and I'm going to protect my chicks. And, you know, fuck with me if you want to hurt these chicks. You know what I mean? Like, it was very protective. It was very, I want to influence in a positive way. I loved that role in a sense of being able to take the things that I had learned and to just share all aspects of my life with this creature that is growing into an adult. It's a beautiful process. Like raising children is a beautiful process. I don't know if I'll ever be in that position again. I have not had children of my own, but I very thoroughly enjoyed that. It was challenging. And there was days where I was like, why am I doing this? This is a choice, first of all. I didn't have children. I'm choosing to be in this dynamic. But it was very rewarding, more so than it was the challenging part. As I'm sure many mothers know, it's like the bullshit that you put up with is it ain't nothing compared to the emotional fulfillment that you get from children and your interactions with them. And I think I did very well in many aspects. I really do. I've always been sort of like a goofy, childlike person myself. And so it was easy for me to, like get into that silly mode and, to play and all of that. And also, I did struggle with many facets that were set up from my childhood as an adult. And one of those, like I said, was being disciplined. When I was disciplined, first of all, like I said, like what was allowed in my household and what wasn't. And in my household growing up, you weren't, yeah, you could be yourself, but until you started experiencing, something deep. Um, like I said, anger is the one I repeatedly go back to because that was my direct experience with it. I was not allowed to express that. It was like, no, this is, you hold that in. You calm, don't you raise your voice at me. You don't get a say in this. You're a child. It was very much like, I know better than you and you don't know shit. And it was very controlling and ego driven and dominating. And that was my template. And I may not have been consciously thinking of this when I entered into, the role of parent, but it was there and it was brought to my attention in this particular dynamic. And I'm grateful that it was, because I grew from it. I grew from it, and that's amazing. I would very much not like that to still be something that I was struggling with. Like I'm glad that I experienced that so I could grow from it. I am not glad that I, had an influence on children in any sort of negative way, just like nobody, first of all, as parents, we have to understand, just as I had to understand that like we are having an influence on children, whether we're aware of it or not. We are going to be aware of plenty of things that we aren't influencing them. We might look at our child who is like mimicking our actions in a sense, and oh, that's cute. Or I can see where they are acting just like me or where my influence is rubbing off on them. But I promise you, just as much as we're aware of the things that we are having an effect on them, there is so much else happening that we are not conscious of that is affecting them. It could be something as simple as our morning routine and how they're processing what we do and how we express ourselves. It is so complex. Children are literally sponges. And, forget about it if you have a child that's very aware. I was a very aware child. So I was like constantly, it was like computer data, just taking it all in. We don't know how that child is processing it necessarily. And so I just say that because I know that, I was in situations where it was like, where I've encountered people who have seemed to have a sense of denial over the impact that they might be having on their children. And, in a sense, I was also that person for a time where I was not really, I was becoming aware. I was in the process of becoming aware, but there was still a sense of denial and detachment from my actions could be having this effect on this child. Like when we're going through the process of discovering things about ourselves, that's already complex. But then to think of it in, oh, this is also going to have an effect on this person, it adds another layer of complexity. Like it's very complex. It's heavy. It's a lot to deal with. And I was going through that. I was recognizing in the beginning stages of recognizing something about myself, simultaneously starting to see how it was affecting how I was relating to this children, and freaking out a bit about both. Like, fuck, I don't like this about myself. This is not good. I don't like feeling this. This is uncomfortable. This is depressing. And then now, oh, I'm seeing how my actions are affecting this other child and feeling guilt and shame and oh crap. And now I'm affecting them. And I just saw this about myself. I don't even, what? Huh? It was panic. But I tried to face it the best I could. And this is where I am having grace with myself now, and where it's like I feel like we have to have grace and compassion with other people because things are hard to face about ourselves without any other person being brought into it. But then we bring someone else into the mix. Look, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of strength and resiliency and courage and accountability to face things about ourselves. So if you're doing it, applaud yourself, applaud others, encourage yourself, encourage others. A lot of times we get fixated and focused on how we're doing it, how we're facing it, how the process is, as opposed to the process is happening. Thank God the process is happening. For many people, they don't face it, they avoid it, they're unconscious of it. So if you are facing it, if you're aware of it, if you're trying to take steps to fix it and to heal and to grow, hell motherfucking yeah. Like that's, we get very caught up on the ways that people do things and how, like, if it suits our preference and if we like it or not. If it's first of all, it's not going to be an instant manifestation overnight. Change is not like ding ding. I mean, it can be, but with things like this, it rarely is, right? Like it takes time. So I think a lot of times, like, you have to have patience, especially if you're in a relationship, how crucial it is to have patience with your partner, with yourself. If they are showing a willingness to even face the things that are causing issues, that is important. You know, we as human beings, especially if we are very critical of ourselves, we are going to be very observant and critical of how someone else is doing things. I have done this myself. I have been on the receiving end of this and the giving end of this, where I have been very critical of someone else and their process and how they are getting through something. And I have also been on the receiving end of someone being very critical towards me and my process and how I'm doing something. And that is why I now have like all this this like data from like both sides, and how I see how really we very quickly get caught in this mode of like, if we're not actively doing something, we turn into experts at times, like, oh, this person should be doing this. Huh? It could easily switch and flip. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've been in both dynamics where it was like, I may not have been directly facing something during a time, but my partner was, and I had all these opinions and beliefs about how they should be doing something and handling it. And it's not to say like having those opinions and beliefs is a negative thing. It's how we're expressing those opinions and beliefs. And this is why I've learned myself, and why I highly advocate focusing on yourself. Not to say you're going to ignore your partner, but more focus on what you're doing. Hold on a second. Jesus. Hold on a second. Sorry. Like I said, I'm awaiting a package, and my dog barked. I thought maybe it was at the door. It is not. But I'm going to begin to summarize now. I believe I was just talking about, like, being on both ends of criticism, essentially, and how important it is to focus on yourself. For one, first of all, we're all going to be hypocrites at some point in our lives. I don't believe hypocrisy is bad. I believe that being unaware of the aspect of hypocrisy is bad. Good grief. I'm just trying to finish this video. So many distractions. Anyway, yes, I do not believe that hypocrisy itself is bad, because we are all going to experience hypocrisy. And you might think, oh, I'm not a hypocrite. This isn't to say that you just are inherently a hypocrite. Although I believe it's human nature to be and not to be at the same time in countless occasions. You know what I mean? Where it's like, this, an example of this is, people, smokers, cigarette smokers, say you're a cigarette smoker and you have all these strong opinions towards people who use drugs, drug addicts, blah, 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 whatever. Well, you are also consuming something that is negative to your health. You know it's negative to your health. There ain't no way you can't know. You know it's negative to your health, and you're still choosing to actively participate in it. And yet you are directing these strong opinions and judgments towards people who are just doing the same thing you're doing, maybe in a more extreme way that society isn't accepting of, because society accepts cigarette smokers for the most part. It's not like, they're outcasts. It's not like there's a rehab, it's setting up rehab and detox centers for cigarette smokers. Just like alcohol, it is more accepted in society. You can get it in every gas station. And yet people who use recreational street drugs seem to get just much more of a bad rap, and sort of looked down upon for doing the same thing that smokers and alcohol drinkers are doing. That's an example of like hypocrisy. Like it happens. We don't need to get hung up on the term itself, just being aware of how we are. And I say being aware because if we're not, we can run the risk of just like sinking into that ego of like I am better, and it sets up a block. It does. And this also ties into the whole like we are going to be teachers throughout our lives and we're going to be students simultaneously, in my opinion, our entire lives. We are going to be in positions where we have something to teach others and we have something to learn our entire lives. And so it's like it's really just about staying humble, really, and taking accountability and not getting hung up on self-righteousness and like where we're currently at, because just like with any lesson in growth, we are going to come back to it at some point. You know what I mean? So it's like instead of shaming and all of that, and or I'm better than, because the second you feel that way, it's like, and another example of this, the fires that are happening in LA or that were happening. I don't watch a whole lot of the news, so I'm not sure like where they're at with that right now, but there's many people of affluence who had lots of money whose entire life was just burned away, and how quickly that happened. And so it's like we just have to stay humble, really humble, showing ourselves compassion and grace, showing others compassion and grace, because we are constantly going to be things and not be things at various times in our lives. And the easier we accept, the more we accept that, the easier and the more smooth it will become. Not to say we'll never face these things, but it becomes easier to shift into the lessons of it, as opposed to getting hung up on the emotions that we feel during those experiences. So yeah, I'm going to wrap it up with that today, guys. I'm going to go back and edit this a little bit. I feel like it was a little bit scattered. I appreciate you guys coming back. Like I said, I'm going to start making many videos. I have a lot to share from my personal experiences. I appreciate anybody new who has subscribed. I see it. I notice it. I thank you. Um, Comment if you like. I like to have conversations. Respectfully, of course, but I enjoy having conversations. I believe that this will reach who it's meant to, and that I am, going to form my soul tribe and all of that good stuff. So, as always, stay safe out there in these cosmic streets, and peace.